Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and I want to continue a topic concerning on drug safety problems and main lessons learned from recent major safety issues if we're talking about history of pharmacovigilance. I have divided and decided to make new these lectures because when I analyze information which now you can meet too online and an open source, we can summarize main lessons learned from recent major safety issues. The potential importance to safety of label use, and this topic is very important, but label use. As we discussed previously, that from one side of label use is very dangerous when we're talking about patient, because it can be source of new adverse reactions, of new risks and signals risk, and it will take some risk minimization measure too. For example, in a very sensitive population, in children, elderly patients, and please be careful too. From another side, we discussed it previously too, that can be source of adverse effects which can be positive afterwards, but off-label use can be reason of positive effects, but it can be reason of conducted clinical trials of new indication. And this information from one side collected regulatory authorities, from another side collected by pharmaceutical industry. But as your medical doctor, be very careful of label use, and your main tasks follow of SMPC and provide all information if you have patient leaflet for patient, and meet him or her with all information concerning on safety profile, adverse reaction, how to write to use these medicines, and that this patient should have open 24 hours, 7 days, right to talk with you, describe you how work these drugs, because it can be new drugs, and please remember that patient is first. I talk now not just a qualified person for pharmacovigilance, I talk now as a doctor because I met many situations, and you can be excellent medical doctor. You can be high qualified medical doctor, but majority cases this depend on, for example, if it's this patient located at home, he has chronic disease and come to you time per time to you visit you. From it depends from his discipline, and very important to have contact with with your patient concerning on medicine, how to take these medicines, what expect for these medicines, what kind of adverse reaction can be. It can be not just adverse reaction like allergic reaction, yes, that you be careful too, because exactly when you use a new drug. I want that you be careful, and I want be useful for you from different side, because this experience which we have, I want share with healthcare professional too, and to be helpful to minimize frequency, as I told before, frequency, severity, seriousness of adverse reactions, and to help of safety of patients. There is a need to evaluate medicines adequately in children and adolescents. The need for greater patient involvement in drug safety. Patients now sometimes read a lot on internet, and we know this another side of problems, and when he read internet information concerning all this group, for example, of medicines, he can find all drugs reactions too, and it's depend on with strict contact with between you and patients. The complexity of evaluate and communicated multiply risk and benefit. The need for regulatory authorities to have sufficient powers to ensure that companies have adequate pharmacovigilance systems and proactively investigate potential risk with marketing products. I would like to represent you examples of drugs that have been withdrawn. It's groups of drugs with long history. When we see, for example, some of them was withdrawn even in early 20th century, for example, salvarsan, it's 1915, toxicity due impurity in therapeutic substance outcome was sulfanilamide, 1937, liver damage due to diethyl glycol solvent changed, companies required to demonstrate safety if their powers increased. Diododiethyl. Its drugs was in 1954 cerebral edema withdrawn this drug. Very sad story, and I said that it's tragedy with thalidomide. It's 1961 congenital malformation withdrawn. Dunlop committee later the CCM established teratogenesis test and improved. Chloramphenicol, 1966, blood decreases, uses restricted. Cleoquinil, 1975, subacute myelooptic neuropathy, withdrawn. Proctalol, we talked about these cases, Sakula mucotenous syndrome, uses restricted. Benoxaprofen, 1982, liver damage, withdrawn, studies in elderly people required. Etamitamide, 1983, adrenal suppression, uses restricted. Zimildidine, 1983, hypertensivity, drug was withdrawn. Exams, another one of drugs, it's Zomepirac, 1993, anaphylaxis withdrawn drugs. Fenclofenac, 1984, Leal syndrome, very, it's very severe adverse reaction, allergic reaction, Lyell syndrome, withdrawn. Ibuprofen, 1984, gastrointestinal bleeding, perforation, drug was withdrawn. Asmacin, 1984, gastrointestinal ulceration, perforation, drug was withdrawn. Phenylbutazone, 1984, blood decreases, uses restricted. Aspirin, these drugs and how often the drug used now, and be careful because we talked about this, about syndrome Raya syndrome, and exactly in children this drug is restricted. Be careful, please read a patient leaflet if you patient, and for medical doctors, for everybody from healthcare authority and pharmaceutical industry, don't use aspirin in children. Please, I pay you attention. Bupropion, 1986, seizures, not marketed in the United Kingdom at that time. Nomifensine, 1986, hemolytic anemia, withdrawn. Tocanamide, 1986, neutropenia, withdrawn. Suprafen, 1987, renal impairment, withdrawn. Spironolactone, pay attention, 1988, animal carcinomatosis, uses restricted, and some countries still use this drug and on some market, and please be careful with it too, and exactly oncogenic awareness you should have too. Flecainide, 1989, cardiac arrhythmias, uses restricted. L-tryptophan, 1990, eosinophilia myalgia syndrome, withdrawn from foodstuffs. Methylpronolol, percentage or 6 percentage 1990 Ontario UVX withdrawn. Somaterol 1990 dwarfs heart failure and some patient uses restricted. Non-capine 1991 genotoxicity withdrawn. Teradilin 1991 cardiac arrhythmia withdrawn. Triazolam 1991 psychiatric disorders withdrawn. Temafloxacin 1992 various serious adverse reaction withdrawn. Centoxin 1993 to increase in mortality withdrawn. Flusequinan 1993 increases mortality withdrawn. Remoxiprid 1994 aplastic anemia withdrawn. You see how many drugs was withdrawn for this time. Cotrimoxazole 1995 serious allergic reaction uses of sulfonamides restricted. Nalfidrafuril 1995 cardiac and neurological toxicity intravenous formulation withdrawn. Sotalol 1996 cardiac arrhythmias uses restricted. Troglitazone 1997 hepatic disorders withdrawn. Talfenadine 1997 interaction with grapefruit juice withdrawn from OTC sales. It can be changed status from OTC to prescribed drugs. Dexvenfluramine 1997 cardiac valve abnormalities withdrawn. Mibefradil 1998 too many drugs interaction withdrawn. It's why look and follow information concerning on drug interaction. Please pay on that attention to your attention. Astemizole 1998 interaction with grapefruit juice. This problems interaction between grapefruit juice, we will talk about it, its interaction and cytochrome 450 on level of liver. And please, now it's strict recommendation not use juice, not use milk, just water for administration for taking drugs, because grapefruit juice is very aggressive with drug food administration. And what we see that what's happened, it's increasing toxicity of drugs because of interaction and on level of cytochrome 450. Celtindol 1998 cardiac arrhythmias withdrawn. Tizaprid 200 acute interval prolongation withdrawn. CERIVASTATIN 2001 rhabdomyolis. It's statin drugs, and very big hopelessness was on this group, but rhabdomyolis is very severe consequences, adverse reaction is this drugs was withdrawn. ROFECOXIB 2004 cardiovascular disease withdrawal. Aprotinin 2007 increase in mortality, renal impairment withdrawal. Benfluorex 2009 pulmonary hypertension, vasculopathy withdrawal. Rosiglitazone 2010 cardiovascular disease withdrawn. Rosiglitazone was big hopelessness on these drugs concerning on treatment of diabetic mellitus, and it shows good efficacy in a group of patients who has diabetic mellitus but is hepatic cardiovascular disease, and consequences became a cause of withdrawal of this drug from market, and it's happening. I want pay attention on a case 2 concerning CERIVASTATIN. CERIVASTATIN was introduced into clinical practice as lipid regulated drugs in 1997. By 2002, the World Health Collaboration Center for International Drug Monitoring, Uppsala, Sweden, received information on 549 cases of acute skeletal muscle necrosis associated with the use of CERIVASTATIN. Subsequently, a warning was issued that CERIVASTATIN causing myopathy and acute skeletal muscle necrosis. In November 1999, in the United States of America, and the March 2000, in Canada, the prescription instruction was changed to include in contraindications the combined use of CERIVASTATIN and gamfibrozil, another lipid-regulated drug. Similar measures were taken in Australia in February 2001. A warning was issued for prescribing physicians about the possibility of developing acute skeletal muscle necrosis when taking drugs from the statin group. In June 2001, regulatory measures were adopted throughout Europe indicated contraindication with the combined use of CERIVASTATIN and gamfibrozil. On August 8 of the same year, the CERIVASTATIN manufacturing company removed the drugs from the sale. It was decision exactly of pharmaceutical company because of possible drug effects. For example, comparison of upper gastrointestinal toxicity of ROFECOXIB and NAPROXEN. VIOXX problems with NOx, it was, who remember, big problem, and in VIOXX was withdrawn too. In patients with rheumatoid arthritis, treatment with ROFECOXIB, VIOXX, a selective inhibitor of cyclooxygenase 2, is associated with significantly fewer clinically important upper gastrointestinal events than treatment with naproxen, a non-selective inhibitor. And then, September 30, 2004, Merck announced today a voluntary withdrawal of ROFECOXIB VIOXX from the United States and worldwide market due to safety concerns of an increased risk of cardiovascular events. According to an alert from MedWatch, the United States Food and Drug Administration FDA Safety Information and Adverse Events Reporting Program. Merck did the right thing by the promptly reporting the finding to FDA and voluntarily withdrawing the products from the market. Acting Food Drug Administration Commissioner Dr. Lester Crawford says the FDA news release also the risk that individual patients will have a heart attack or stroke related to VIOXX is very small, but the study that was halted suggests that overall patients taking the drug chronically face twice the risk of heart attack compared to patients receiving a placebo. According to the FDA Public Health Advisory, patients who are currently taking ROFECOXIB should contact their physician for guidance regarding discontinuation and alternative therapies. The widely recognized recall of VIOXX and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs played a strong role in driving new safety reforms at the FDA rulemaking level. Approved by the FDA in 1999, VIOXX initially hoped to be safer than previous analgesic medicine due to its lower risk of the bleeding. It's what we see that we see problems that company wanted minimize risk of bleeding, but what we get risk of cardiovascular disease, and it became problem and became a reason of withdrawal of market too. However, it was estimated to have contributed to fatal heart attack in thousands of patients in the United States. With regard to the VIOXX withdrawal, there was widespread debate on reforms in the United States Food Drug Administration procedures for pre- and post-market medicine safety regulations. It is also critical for healthcare professionals and pharmaceutical companies to appropriately monitor drug safety in the post-marketing step. what are very important too. Research published in the medical journal Lancet estimated that 88,000 Americans had heart attacks from taking VIOXX and 38,000 of them died. Merck announced it will pay more than 4.85 billion to N1000 on lawsuit over its painkiller VIOXX. The amount to be paid in the so-called settlement fund is believed to be the largest drug settlement ever. The White House, stationed by the drug maker, emphasizes that are not admitting fault. The settlement lets Merck avoid the personal injury lawsuit of some of 47,000 plaintiffs and about 265 potential class action cases filed by people or family members who claim the drug proved fatal or injured its user. Conclusions. What we can conclude after 2-hour lectures right now. First of all, clinical trials may fail to address all safety concerns on the medicine, as it's very important to conduct clinical trials according and due GXP, exactly GCP requirement and GVP requirement too, and it's why again main point in clinical trials is point on clinical. Very difficult to make analysis for specialists who has no clinical experience, who has no medical education. Please be aware of it. Have in staff patients with deep knowledge of clinical trials, plus pharmacovigilance, plus it should be medical doctor or specialist with medical education, not bachelor but master degree. And yes, it will be plus if this specialist has clinical experience, who worked in clinical hospitals and understand difference. For example, it can be symptom, sign, laboratory value of patient like disease. For example, we know it, we will cover in different models, cover and assume medical knowledge, and it will be help for medical doctors summarize knowledge, because what I met now, new knowledge concerning only pathogenesis can be, and plus new knowledge of clinical pharmacology, plus new knowledge concerning on clinical pharmacovigilance. It can be helpful for medical doctor to get new level in this practical medicine knowledge too. Please be attention to the defect of clinical trials to identify medication safety consists of small study sample size, limited age group excluding children, adolescent, elderly, special population, pregnant women too. Short duration of study, it can be reason of that not all adverse events can appear in this clinical study, because we know clinical adverse reaction can appear, for example, more than 1 or 3 years. If we met the situation, we will discuss with it in our future lectures. Following the introduction of the medicine to the pharmaceutical market, massive population get exposed to the medicine globally. For small information of the adverse reaction is collected over time, as the medicine is usually a multiplying indication on a different subsets of patients, and this limitation modifies the safety profile of the drug. So, when a drug is newly marketed, much may have been achieved about its effects, while relatively little many have been learned about its safety. It's very important. Remember,